Hello and welcome back to the third installment of Cisco's Advanced Threat Hunting video series. This is the second in a two-part video series which demonstrates how to do basic threat hunting and incident response using Cisco's Advanced Threat portfolio. In part 1, we walked through a typical malware infection incident, demonstrating how to track malicious infections and gather data from Cisco Threat Response, formerly known as Cisco Visibility, as well as AMP for Endpoints. In part 2, I will demonstrate additional features of Cisco Threat Response, including integrations with Umbrella Investigate and ThreatGrid. To supplement this video, we have provided a threat hunting worksheet designed by Cisco Incident Response Services. I encourage you to download this worksheet and fill it out as we move through the exercise. You can find a link to a PDF copy of the worksheet in the video description. In part 1 of this two-part series, we investigated a series of anomalous IP addresses provided to us by the networking team. Upon determining that at least one of these IP addresses was related to malicious traffic, we pivoted to AMP for Endpoints to determine what malicious files were involved and why these files were not blocked by AMP for Endpoints. Additionally, we determined what commands were executed by the malware. Now that we have developed a profile of the malware, let's expand our investigation to bring in the full threat intelligence research capabilities of Cisco Threat Response. We will begin by pivoting to Threat Response using the SHA-256 of the malware. Simply select the drop-down menu next to the SHA-256 and select Investigate this SHA under the Visibility subheading. This will begin a new query in Cisco Threat Response and auto-populate the relations graph with information related to the SHA-256. Once the relations graph finishes loading, we will take a close look at the Sightings tab under the Observables section. Here we are able to locate the file name as well as the file path that the malware is running from. One of the AMP IOCs we encountered earlier indicated this malware is a PoweLiks variant. Let's see if ThreatGrid can provide us additional information related to this file. Select the drop-down menu next to the SHA-256 and click Browse for that SHA-256 under the ThreatGrid subheading. The ThreatGrid Artifacts report shows details about this artifact, associated paths, and a list of related samples with links to their analysis reports. Scroll down to view a list of related samples. ThreatGrid has seen this file many times with different file names, but always with the same SHA-256 hash. Let's click on one of the linked file names to look at a sample report and find out what ThreatGrid knows about the file. The first behavioral indicator confirms this file is a PoweLiks variant. We can expand the indicator to see additional information about this detection. This tells us the PoweLiks is a variant of a Trojan that does not require a file to be present on the victim system. Instead, it leverages JavaScript embedded in the registry to store and launch itself. Then it interfaces with PowerShell or .NET to carry out its instructions. Back in Cisco Threat Response, the relations graph has several pieces of related intelligence, including 2 URLs and 4 IP addresses. The domains and IP addresses come from events surrounding the initial observation of the SHA-256 when it was seen on the internal host. Our relations graph shows the malicious file connected to 2 URLs, both hosted on the retdemos.com domain. We can add both of these URLs to our investigation by clicking on the context menu icon and selecting Add to Investigation. Note the orange Suspicious URL label for the domain. This signifies the URL has been identified as suspicious. The Observables pane will show us that Talos Intelligence is responsible for the suspicious judgment. We can pivot to the Talos Intelligence Reputation Center by clicking Talos in the source column of the Judgments tab to attain more in-depth information. Talos Intelligence Database indicates that the URL points to a server in Singapore, and that this server has a poor reputation from Talos Web Reputation Center. This accounts for the suspicious label in the threat response. Back in the Threat Response console, the Relations graph shows us information about the relationship between the observables in this investigation. If we click one of the suspicious URLs, we can see that it is hosted by one of the IPs in our graph, namely 52.148.86.91. Let's look up this IP address in the Umbrella Investigate console to find out more about the domains that it is hosting. Click on the context menu for the IP address and select IP View under the Umbrella heading. The Umbrella Investigate console shows us this IP address has played host to 2 malicious domains in the past week, legitmalware.xyz and retdemos.com. We already knew that retdemos.com was hosted at this IP address, but the other domain, legitmalware.xyz, is a new link in our investigation. Let's view the Umbrella Investigate report for this new domain by clicking on the link for legitmalware.xyz. The Umbrella Investigate report shows a wealth of information about the domain, including the Umbrella risk score, a graph of the volume of DNS requests over time, which shows intermittent DNS lookups that can be indicative of a recently created malicious domain. Additional data includes whois record data for the domain showing registrant's email, name, and address, geolocation for the IP hosting the domain, as well as requesters, and threat grid samples that have been associated with the domain and current categorization of the domain. Once we have finished researching the domain in Umbrella Investigate, let's add both domains to our threat response investigation, along with our hosting IP address to see if any other endpoints in our environment have been exposed to this malicious infrastructure. Go back to Threat Response and click the Edit this investigation button to open the search terms text box. Then add the two domains and the IP address from the Umbrella Investigate console. We can immediately see that two additional endpoints have surfaced, both of which have contacted the legitmalware.xyz domain. After rearranging our relations graph, it becomes clear that another malicious SHA-256 has surfaced, as well as additional clean SHA-256s, more IP addresses, and several more URL nodes. Let's find out what these clean SHA-256s are by looking them up in the AMP for Endpoints file trajectory. For each clean file, we will select the clean file icon and click the file trajectory option under AMP for Endpoints heading. Our first file has a SHA starting in 6C05 and is known to be a version of PowerShell.exe. The next file has a SHA starting in 17F7. It is signed with a VeriSign Class 3 certificate and is known to be cmd.exec. The third clean SHA starts with 5 Alpha Delta 3 and is commonly known as RunDLL32. This file is signed by Microsoft Corporation. The final clean file with a SHA starting with 4312 is Firefox.exe. This file is signed by Mozilla Corporation, confirming that it is a known clean file. Looking under the network profile information, we see this file has been seen connecting over ports 80, 443, 4444, and 8080. Additionally, we have a list of IP addresses it connected to, including our known malicious IP. The URLs listed also contain our legitmalware.xyz domain. Finally, under the device trajectory section, we see both the demo AMP exploit prevention audit and demo AMP exploit prevention endpoints. In Cisco Threat Response, let's take a look at the new malicious file that appeared in our relations graph. This file starts with FCE5B. We will add this to our investigation using the context menu and selecting Add to Investigation. The SHA-256 now populates in our Observables pane and has been linked to two hosts with several sightings. Let's take a look at this SHA in the Observables pane and see what information we can gather from the Judgments, Verdicts, Sightings, and Indicators tabs. The Judgments tab provides us with a list of judgments from the various integrated modules, including the disposition associated with the file, the reason the disposition was assigned, the severity and confidence each module has in its judgment, the traffic light protocol rating, and an expiration date. The Verdicts tab tells us the Threat Response considers this file to be malicious and provides an expiration date. The Sightings tab provides information regarding each endpoint that has seen the file, including the hostname, GUID, file location, file name, and additional metadata. The Indicators tab also provides us a definitive confirmation that this is a dorkbot variant and has been identified as such by the Threat Grid Sandbox. Using the context menu next to the SHA-256, we can pivot to Threat Grid and view all samples for this SHA. Scrolling to the bottom, we'll get a list of all samples available that match this SHA regardless of the name of the file. Opening up a sample provides us a wealth of information related to the sample, including what behavioral indicators are displayed, any file artifacts that are available, and a screen runtime if we wish to watch the video. After rearranging our threat response relations graph, we can see that two of our endpoints connected to the legitmalware.xyz domain. The third endpoint connected to the retdemos.com domain and was confirmed to be infected with the PoweLiks malware variant. We also know that only one of the other two endpoints was actually infected with the dorkbot malware. Under the Sightings tab in the Observable pane, we can see there are two AMP for Endpoints events related to this particular malware. In one instance, the malware infected the endpoint, and in the other, the malware did not. Let's see if we can determine the difference between these two endpoints by checking the AMP event within the Observables pane. Upon loading, Device Trajectory presents us with a filtered view based on the SHA-256 of the dorkbot malware. From here we can see that PowerShell was used as the initial vector for loading this file onto the endpoint. We can also see the file was detected and quarantined via retrospective quarantine event. Selecting a network connection icon demonstrates that this malware reached out to and connected to the legitmalware.xyz domain. Let's remove the filter on Device Trajectory and see if we can discover additional information as to how this file was loaded on the endpoint. After scrolling back in time, we're able to identify an indicator of compromise linked to the legitmalware.xyz domain. Let's filter on the legitmalware.xyz domain and see if we can discover additional information. Here we're able to confirm
that Firefox reached out to the legit malware.xyz domain. This would seem to be a pretty strong indicator that Firefox was leveraged to install this malware in some way.
Back in Cisco Threat Response, let's see if we can determine why our final endpoint was not infected by the dorkbot malware. Select the endpoint, validate that you have the correct hostname, then select the context menu to the computer GUID and click on Device Trajectory under AMP for Endpoints header. Upon loading, we see that Firefox.exe is present with several outgoing network connections. Selecting one of these connections shows that Firefox reached out to the legit malware domain on port 8080. Next, we see an exploit prevention icon indicating that AMP for Endpoint's exploit prevention engine blocked an attempted exploit of Firefox. This shows us that the endpoint was not infected as the AMP for Endpoint's engine blocked the attempted exploit before it could be leveraged to infect the endpoint. Having tracked down all malicious files and network connectivity related to our initial IP addresses, we confirm that all potential related infections have been accounted for and the appropriate actions have been taken and documented. Thank you for watching this installment of How to Threat Hunt with Cisco Advanced Threat Solutions.